Hey everyone, my name is Nathan Pay and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Crypto. We've got Miles joining us again. Thanks so much for coming by. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I love being here.
Yeah, and
This is the place I like to be.
right, and it's just great getting a chance to talk about everything we're learning because it's part of our job to stay up to speed with everything in this space. So I kind of want to cover some things that are happening or have happened, and I think starting with ledgers.
So that's a
Debacle.
huge topic, well, a huge scary topic. That's actually a really small thing, but it's a big thing at the same time. Basically, what's going on right now with that is that there was a lot of scrutiny to Ledger, the company, because they released or announced that they were going to be releasing a firmware update that includes a membership program which allows you to export your private key from your Ledger device and shard it into 3 shards, leave those shards with 3 different trusted parties, and then if you ever lost your key, you'd be able to recover it. And of course, the controversy comes down to the ability for Ledger to be able to push programming in the form of firmware updates that would eventually allow them to export your private key.
Yeah, and they had said like months and months and months ago that that wasn't possible. That your seed phrase was secure and
That's right.
firmware wouldn't change that. And that's really I think where they got the heat was that there was contradictory information on the Twitter.
Well, because
About
their
it.
initial response was, "That's not possible. Trust us."
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And that's not the right response. The word trust is kind of a bad word in the Web3 industry.
rather than
and
explaining it.
They rather than explaining themselves in the way that they've chosen to explain themselves, and I think it's the right way, is that recently they've announced that they're going to make their code open source so that people can
Which is
see
good.
exactly how their Ledger wallets are programmed and be sure that there's no way in the programming for them to have their keys exported without their knowledge.
And there's a counterpoint to this, which I don't agree with, but I understand it. Looking at the next billion users being onboarded or million users being onboarded, there is a lot of crypto that has been lost forever
That's right.
because of understanding seed phrase and like even me going through that as a business. There's this huge process of understanding how to store the keys properly, not keeping them in digital form. Well, if you're keeping them in physical form, what do? Do you bury it in your yard? Do you give it to a bank? Do you put it in a vault? Those are all lessons that people have to go through themselves. And there's lots of tips out there, and you can buy like the metal thing that etches your key phrasing, but they're all still security risks in a way.
That's true.
And if you could memorize it, even better. But like someone like us, for example, for me, I have more than 50 wallets easily.
There's no way you're going to memorize.
There's no
the
way I'm
keys
going
for
to
all of
memorize
them.
it. But as a company, and this is something that we do frequently, I'll just, format or wipe all my devices and go back through all the recovery process, because going through the recovery process allows me to
Keep it fresh
understand.
in your mind.
Not only that, it's like, okay, I can do that if anything happened.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who just get a wallet and they've been using that wallet forever and stuff can happen. So I understand the need, and I put that in air quotes because that's a matter of perspective, to help people feel more comfortable getting on board, that they're not at risk of losing that.
Well, ultimately there is, and the statistic is not going away that there is a significant amount of slippage in crypto. Like people lose, I want to say the number is like upwards of $40 million of crypto per year. Or it might just be in total, I can't remember, but $50 million of crypto just going poof because people can't remember their
There's
passwords
people I
is
know who have
seriously significant.
Bitcoins, like multiples, locked on a laptop that they can't get back into because they can't get their password.
Yeah.
Like they just can't. And they've tried to do all these different things. And then, there's people like, I seen an interesting video about someone paying a hacker to get through into their treasure. And they did. They managed to. It was a very difficult, convoluted process. But, they had to pay a pretty sum to get that.
Of course.
So, I mean, how much money is worth doing that? But then it also kind of brings in the question, well, and that was just for a pin. So that was just the pin to access the treasure itself. That's different from like
Right.
your seed
It's not
phrase.
obviously not a security risk for crypto itself.
Yeah, if
just a
someone had
security
lost
risk
that
for
treasure,
somebody's device.
then they'd be screwed. So I understand the on-ramping, onboarding thing, but this whole space, I think, is predicated on decentralization because of the nature of Bitcoin.
That's right.
So the moment a company says, hey, we know you've been trusting us with your crypto because, A, you don't trust exchanges anymore. You've seen what happened to Mt. Gox and all these, and FTX and Celsius and BlockFi. But now you can't even trust your hardware wallet because they can just release a firmware, and now that's a security breach point.
Well, the other angle is that if somebody is ever going to become the custodian of your wallet, first of all, that classifies them legally as a custodian. But second of all, that means that they could be subpoenaed by the government in their area to then give over the information of
That's right.
the portion of the seed phrase that you've got and which ID it's connected to, so that they can pin you to a wallet.
That's right.
Well, in this country, they have you registered as the owner of this wallet.
And I understand
Nobody wants to be registered as the owner of a wallet.
Yeah,
Because that fucks with
there's
decentralization.
tax implications. Maybe I shouldn't say implications. Laws, like you gotta report your assets, and there's certain things you have to adhere to, and it's different in different countries. So it's always important that you're following those. But there are opportunities to have Bitcoin, hold it, and keep it anonymous, and still be compliant with your country's laws, and that is a huge benefit to people. And then also thinking about other countries that even have issues with like the government stealing their identification or not allowing them access to bank accounts. I mean, we've seen that in Canada with the truckers thing and freezing bank accounts and all kinds
That's
of other
right.
stuff. Crypto was an alternative to help those people. And just the nature of decentralization, I think, is why Web3 was so up in arms.
Well,
Right
the other
about
thing, we have a lot of gray area concerning what counts as like programmability, for example, in digital currency. For example, we have the EU. They've rolled out their CBDC system, or was it the UK? I think it was the EU, and they are trying to sort of redefine what counts as programmability with digital currency, so that they can claim that their digital currency is not programmable, when in fact there are ways for them to program the currency.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But their definition of programmable is different than what these ways might be, and thus they've skirted around the problem. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't. That's not the problem. Logical problem won't go away.
Well, it's like selling a product and promising a certain aspect that product will deliver, and then a year later saying, nope, actually, we're doing something different. And it's like, well, you misled your entire customer base.
The problem was that the claim in the first place was trust based, and the whole point about cryptocurrency, the whole battle that we're having right now with CBDCs versus free cryptocurrency, is that we do not want to trust anybody.
That's right.
Except for ourselves when it comes to the custody of our assets.
Yeah.
So this issue with the CBDCs and the issue with the ledger wallets and everything really just calls into question: do we indeed have sovereign control over our own assets or not?
Well, you bring up a really interesting point, because ultimately the answer is no. And this might be a shock to some people, but if you really look into it, you'll understand. You don't own anything
That's right.
until someone, you own it perceivably until someone in a bigger position of power wants it. Great example is your home getting bought out for a mall to be built, or like what they do in certain parts of the country when they're developing a new city. If your home was here, too bad, it's gone. California, great example. You don't own land like you think you do, because if the government wants to take it or someone else needs to take, they will. And really, the only thing that we had sovereign control over was our thoughts.
Yes.
Until Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin finally made it, well, now we can have sovereign control of our finances.
We figured out a logical way to give people sovereign control over their finances.
And here's why. You can memorize your seed phrase. But now the question is, well, we have to also look at all the points, the weak points along that chain. Well, if I'm remembering my seed phrase, what wallet is that I'm using? What's the agenda of the company? What's their narrative that they're playing? What is the option for kind of like what we're seeing? Can they change their mind, or change their firmware, or change their policies? And I think it just kind of reiterates to me the need for diversification. Like, don't just have one wallet. Don't just have one token. Don't just have,
what a lot of people are talking about, and I think with the I guess the most organized way to look at this would be, especially if you're an opponent of firmware updates and you want to have a device that works and continues to work forever.
And you need to for security breaches. Hackers can go after old
Buy
versions.
a Bitcoin wallet that you use for Bitcoin. Buy an Ethereum wallet that you use for Ethereum. Buy a PayPay wallet that you use for PayPay. Separate those things so that they don't have to be interoperable in the future, and that there are no updates that will be necessary for them to work.
Yep.
When you buy a padlock, you don't buy a padlock and then later on find out that your padlock needs a firmware update for you to put the key in. No, you just need it. It needs to physically be able to have that key go in today and 60 years from now.
Yeah, and we've seen why that's not good with exchanges, because like BlockFi, Celsius, these are great examples. They had fantastic APY staking platforms. I mean, I remember during the bull run, it was like 10-20% on some stable coins and stuff, and even just people in finance were like, that's not going to work for long, and everyone else in crypto was like, this is amazing, let's do it. Well, what happened when they went down? People's funds got stuck, and there are still people. I mean, the Mt. Gox scandal that happened, people are just starting to get some of their funds released now, at the value of what Bitcoin was way back then. So
That's
it's
right.
not like the holding and waiting was beneficial to them because now
No.
their Bitcoin is worth more. They're getting paid out on what it would have been, and they're not even getting all of it. And then actually BlockFi just tweeted, I think, a couple weeks ago, maybe a week ago, where they basically said that part of the bankruptcy or the court proceedings said that if you had any assets in BlockFi, those are BlockFi's assets. You gave up permission for your crypto. It is not yours. And they are using that money to pay the lawyers for the bankruptcy.
That's right.
And it's like, that's a rug pull, right?
That's pretty well the definition of one. That's right.
So people are realizing, okay, we can't trust exchanges.
Well, now we're at the point where a lot of people are starting to question hard staking.
Well, that's the thing. It's like
because hard stake, when you hard stake something, you're locking it up in a smart contract. The smart contract is now the thing that holds your object, not you. Whereas with newer protocols, for example, Lightning Network or the Sui Network, they have soft staking protocols where the thing never really leaves your wallet. And that's really, really important. It still maintains security and trustlessness, but it's still in your possession at the end of the day.
I'm glad you mentioned the Lightning Network too, because I just seen an announcement from Jack at the recent Bitcoin conference. I think it was just a few days ago, maybe a week ago. And he was talking about how now Strike is accessible to 3 billion people. And by moving their headquarters from America to El Salvador has really allowed them to do it. And they've taken this new approach. It's a very bold black and white brand. I kind of like it. They're kind of going for like a punk vibe. But obviously the complexity of, if I can send my Canadian dollars to you in rupees or in yen or, and I don't even have to understand that there's a crypto transaction going on behind the background is really smart.
Yeah, it's seamless.
And it's really exciting to see the expansion to the 3 billion, users. I think the Lightning Network is one of the most greatest examples of how more technology is just simply going to be built on these blockchains, on these networks, and we're just at the very beginning.
That's where I'm at too. People have this question about scalability and this question about, is everything going to be interoperable? But if you really think about it, the cryptocurrencies that people are really, that have been around longest and that people would really en masse be putting their money in, really just Bitcoin and Ethereum at the very, very top. And even NFTs are getting a pretty bad rap these days, and who knows if they're going to be an essential thing or if they're just going to end up being a byproduct of Ethereum or Bitcoin. But the point is that as solutions come out on these major, example, the Lightning Network will help drive sort of a universal adoption of those major coins, Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I think then solutions will be built on top of those, example, the Lightning Network or second layer solutions on Ethereum that will then become interoperable. And that's where the ecosystem will be. It'll be just like the internet. The internet was just one place where people could then make other places that it links to. And now there are just so many links that it's a giant web, what I mean? And that's what's going to happen, I think, with because everything that's how things grow organically. They grow in links. Right?
Yeah, and there's consolidation with networks and stuff, and
and consolidation is inevitable, especially when things outgrow their. A good example would be the last bull run. Everything grew really, really fast, but it outgrew the value that was really there. And when that value went away, a lot of the things that were not stable or that were not sustainable crumbled.
Well, it's like any new. I think AI is a really good example of this right now. Like, look back at the internet tech bubble. So many VC firms and VC startups that were just garbage, and they needed that kind of crash to wipe them out. And that's why I think the silver lining of the bear market, and bear markets are an important part of the crypto cycle, is to wipe out those projects that really have no proper foundation or basis or value add. Or maybe they did have a great idea, but when they actually got to the hard work of coding it and developing it, they realized there was a bigger issue here and it can't be solved as simple as they thought.
Right.
And then you have the good projects kind of rising, the ones that are surviving and building. So, I mean, I think there's a healthy aspect to that, but AI is like that too right now. Like, there's so many crypto startups that are just getting funneled shit tons of money from VC capital firms, just like we seen during the bull run with crypto, where they were basically throwing money at any project that was like, hey, we're Web3. And had a nice little 5-page presentation that they could pitch a VC company in 20 minutes and get a $100,000 investment. And it was like, is this happening? But that's just how the world operates. But a lot of these AI startups, I'm even going to predict 98% of them will be done within a few years, because they're just, I mean, when you look at Elon and ChatGPT and the computer power that's necessary to run that, you're going to need $250 million to start. to have the computing power to be able to run AI that's actually at a certain level. But these startups are getting 8 million, 10 million,
Yeah,
25
that's right.
million. And it's like, how's that going to work? Or, you know, and I'm very interested to see that play out because maybe they're going to have to piggyback on these other platforms, and that's probably what it is. These companies will just build on top of what's already
That's what I'm willing to
there.
bet is going to happen. They're going to use the base product, the base thing, like ChatGPT is a good example, to be the base of their product. They'll build it on top of that and use that as their source.
And this brings up something else that's been interesting is Membots. And I don't know if a lot of people listening are aware of that, but I'll explain it. Basically, it's a front-running bot. It's kind of not the best way to explain it, but the easiest in terms. And what it's doing is when there's a transaction, let's say we're on Ethereum, and you've got an Ethereum transaction that's pending, and there's another person's Ethereum transaction that's pending. The Membot will take those two transactions, put them into its own single block, arbitrage the price difference, and then write it together.
As a single
as
block.
a single well, as a
order to-
single transaction to go onto it. It's kind of like how a lot of different layered solutions, layer 2 solutions and things work with like taking a bunch of transactions, blocking them together and making it quicker.
Right.
So same kind of idea with a Membot, but these Membots are making a killing, like absurd amount of money, and they're bots just being run. And there are
No
a lot of
kidding.
people who are like, we should find a way to ban this, and we should find a way to, you know, stop Membots. And it's like, well, you can't. Like, that's just the nature of blockchain. That's the nature of how transactions work. And if someone's able to do that, then they are.
The
So
way that you stop that is by creating a solution like Lightning where it's already built in.
yes, in a way, but even still, in theory, they could still work with that. I think you've got a point there about, you know, security, and it's a little bit harder to kind of, but Membots with enough developing programming language can be used on almost any network. So we're starting to see, wait a second, developers, coders, programmers have a huge advantage here because if you can understand how to create some of these bots, there is ridiculous amounts of money to be made. Well, guess what AI can do?
All of that. But
All
faster.
of that, but faster. So now it's like, well, we're going to start to see a lot more AI trading bots. I mean, that was already a thing during the last bull run, and even I experimented. KuCoin had a whole bunch of
Okay,
trading
but
bots. And they were
AI
good.
bots, the trading bots from
Completely
the last
different.
bull run, they don't have the year and a half of data that they would have today.
Yeah, and they were simple. They were simple bots. They weren't AI. They were called AI trading bots, but
What
really
I
they
mean
were
is
just
that a
bots.
real AI fed all of the data from the last, the last cycle basically would be able to make really, really good trading decisions.
Yeah,
this
and it's
cycle.
interesting. So it's like you got these Membots, you've got AI. We're going to see, I think what's going to happen too over the next 6 months to years is going to become a lot more of that. There's going to be a lot more front running bots and a lot more of these Membots, and, you know, and people who are the ones developing and implementing them are going to make a lot of fucking money.
That's true.
And
That is true.
it's interesting because right away, like when I learned about it, it's like, wait, should I go learn how to code? And it's like, no, I don't want to do that. But it's understandable that it would be enticing. So, you know, reading a couple articles, and I enjoy the technical jargon in a lot of the development and developer articles with crypto because it reminds me of my engineering background and stuff. So I can read a lot of the technical stuff. But I mean, it's really interesting to see. It doesn't seem overly complicated. Obviously, the better you are at it, the better the bot can perform. But I mean, it's
Well,
interesting. There's an
I
issue.
don't remember who said this, but somebody said, I don't remember where the saying comes from, that good technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I think that is fully the case when it comes to elegant programming too.
Yep.
Technology software wise is the exact same as technology hardware wise. You're just creating tools and using those tools to have something.
Yeah, but it's
done.
going to be like, tell AI, make me a front running bot that deploys and launches on itself and requires no upkeep or maintenance. Ta-da! And it's like, what's going to happen I'm very interested to see how AI is going to impact the markets, impact token prices, impact the creation of more and more of these bots as well.
I think if I think about it from like a, I guess a suggestive point of view, the point of view that I'm seeing is that you'll have this group of people that won't have access to AI, and then a group of people who will have access to AI, who will inevitably and quicker be able to make better decisions
Yes.
in the same competitive space, example, the market.
Yeah.
And so those without AI will just suffer because they won't be able to outpace the people who are using AI to make better decisions.
I mean, it's interesting. We've got like crypto. If you were to put crypto and AI next to each other, I would even argue that AI is more important to be adept on right now because crypto impacts our finances, and, you know, like there's a lot of amazing things we've talked about a million times on this channel with it. but AI has the ability to impact every aspect of our life.
I agree
Right?
with you, but I also disagree with you. I'm actually on the other side of that argument, and I
Okay.
think that because of the nature of human beings, we would, though slower, eventually come to the same conclusions that AI will come to. But the crypto thing is like a super necessary change to our financial institution right now, and if it doesn't change, the world is like basically going to end. So
Okay,
to
that's a
avoid the
different
world
comparison.
ending and
Yeah.
us being able to make those decisions in the first place, we have to implement a proper financial system. Then we can worry about if we're making those decisions smart enough or fast enough and develop AI in order to do that.
Yeah, but it's just AI can impact everything. I mean, our
You're
cars,
right.
any application of like
Literally anything.
automation, everything will automate.
There won't be any inventors anymore because AIs would be able to invent things better than we would,
And then the interesting thing
simply
is
because they can consider more things at once.
that's right. And when they're talking about the super, basically AI being done this decade, which is the self-teaching, self-learning one, and then like, how do we go on that ride with it? Like, we won't even know what it's learning and how far it's going until we see the applications in real life. And Elon brings up a good point. He's always been kind of weary on it, and I understand that. It's like any new technology. It's like nuclear power or
Doesn't threaten humanity.
electricity.
That's why Elon is so scared. He is a humanist, and it threatens humanity in some
Yeah,
ways.
but any new technology can be used. It's like a tool, right? Like a
That's
hammer can be used to murder someone, but it can also be used to create a deck.
That's true.
Like it's how it's being applied.
That's exactly right. But with the history repeating itself and with the way that people are, we have.
Doesn't give us a lot of confidence.
There's a good case to be made that AI will be taught to do naughty things and not necessarily taught to do good things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it will be weaponized. I think that's something that a lot of governments will do. But what I want to focus more on is how that's going to impact crypto. And for the sake of our viewers and just this series, also the bots are really interesting to me, like the Membots and the amount of money that they're making, and just front running bots have been around for a long time too. We also have bots on clicker games and different DeFi platforms. And I mean, like, my imagination just goes wild because imagine if it's like you can tell it to perform certain actions that'll maximize your yield returns.
Well,
Oh my
let's
God,
just
like,
talk
it just
about
gets
anti-cheat
nuts.
solutions for
Okay.
a second, and then insert this narrative into that
Yep.
into that scenario. Like example, we have a game, Heroes of Mavia. They have an anti-cheat system wherein they basically have a virtual version of any game that's going on at any time running concurrent with the actual version of the game which you are playing. And if for whatever reason something should be different between the two versions of the game is invalidated and it doesn't go through. Well, if you think about AI, I mean, if AI was clever enough, it would be able to operate that game in the same way that a person could operate that game.
Yes.
And so if you were using an AI bot, maybe not one that uses, digital like coding in order to control your machine, but one that physically controls your machine the way that you do with your hands.
Yeah,
Well, that would get right past that cheating system, wouldn't it?
it would.
And that's not an impossible thing to build considering the power of AI, you know
That's
what I mean?
right.
So I mean, it's a really scary precedent that we're faced with.
But also very exciting at the same time.
But also exciting. Yeah.
But that's why I feel like staying on top of all of this change and being open to it and also being think critically about it is really important.
That's true.
And I just the Membot thing kind of blew me away when I really took a little bit
It's
more time.
not super surprising to me, and honestly, as far back as I can remember since I've been in the Web3 space, I've always known that if I just go down the dark path and find the right people, that I could find trading bots and make $1 gajillion just day trading and stealing people's money. But that's not
It's
going
an ethical question then too, right?
That's not going to progress crypto at all, and it's not going to change the world for the better at all. It's just going to make me a bunch of money that other people
But
deserve.
people are very incentivized by finances. So like,
Oh, of course.
and even I had that moment when I was reading all the Membot documents where I was like, should I go learn how to do this? And it's like, no, but knowing that there's an opportunity there is what makes people take inspired action. And I can't blame anyone for wanting to go learn how to do that. I mean, it's definitely interesting. Nothing we say is financial advice, but I mean, it's definitely interesting to take a look at what some of these bots are capable of and how they're actually operating. It's kind of like learning about hacking. Learning about hacking or how you can be compromised actually allows you to protect yourself better. It's not necessarily that you want to go become a hacker and
Well,
go
when I
harm
went to
other
college,
people.
when I went to college for software development, one of the we had 4 semesters, and one of our semesters was really dedicated to learning how to break things so that you could build them so that they can't be broken as easily. And the term that hackers would use or that programmers would use would be white hat programmers, black hat programmers.
That's right.
And you have to have a white hat programmer does not become a good security analyst or a good database analyst unless they know the mind of their enemy. and are able to prevent it. It's the same way as police officers work. They try to get into the mind of their suspect in order to figure out what their motive might be.
Yeah, it's very interesting
what I
to
mean?
see what's going to happen. I feel
Just like
like
that.
moving so fast, we're going to have a lot to talk about on AI specifically and its impact on crypto.
It's a huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to having some future episodes about that. That'll be
Yeah,
really
let's do
exciting.
it.
And thanks so much for everyone joining us today. As always, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And until next time, cheers.